What's happening on the floor? What's going to happen in the next hour?
Good afternoon, Stephen. Joining you from our other studio here at the DA's National Congress. You'll see on the floor behind me, they're still discussing resolutions. I think that they just finished debating the resolution to set up a commission of inquiry to look into farm murders. That one being proposed by Dr. Ivan Meyer. As far as we know, that one had passed. With me is Siviwe Gwarube. She's the national spokesperson for this Congress. Siviwe, before we get into it, did that resolution on farm murders pass?
Yes, I'm told the resolution has been passed, yes.
A few interesting ones. We'll get into the discussion around some of the latest issues. Before we do that, the DA deciding that it wants South Africa to withdraw from the BRICS group. That's one of the interesting ones that have come up, and taking an international position which is essentially completely contrary to what was decided by the ANC. Are you happy with how the resolution discussions have gone and what's passed and what's failed?
Yeah. Look, I mean, this is an integral part of Congress. Of course, there's, the glitz and glamour of an opening ceremony, the performances and the like. But this is an actual integral part of Congress where the organization resolves, amends its constitution, resolves certain things. And so it's important that these things are done and they're discussed. And so I'm happy with the way in which proposals of resolutions are able to motivate to Congress, because a lot of some of this was done online preceding Congress, but the proposals are able to address the Congress, and they're able to essentially make a motivation for a vote. And I think particularly on the international aspects of some of these resolutions. Of course, Govan, as you know, one of the things that we are preparing ourselves for in the next 14 months is the possibility that we might find ourselves in national government. And so we've also got to be internationally looking when we are discussing not just about South Africa and the like, but our worldview on certain things.
The prospect of being in a national government in a coalition means that you likely have to work with smaller parties. John Steenhuisen had said in his speech there that you in the National Assembly are preparing bills that would regulate the power of splinter parties or smaller parties. What exactly was he referring to?
So there's a series of bills which I'm championing in Parliament at the moment, and the bills really are aimed at stabilising coalition governments. Of course, we have also been at the center of coalition governments in the city of Johannesburg, in the city of Ekurhuleni just last week, and in the city of Tshwane, where we've seen how instability directly affects service delivery. And our view here is that perhaps one of the things that is needed in South Africa is a legal framework in which coalition governments are negotiated, are settled on, and are operated on. Some of the key proposals include coalition agreements which are binding, which are codified, which are made public, so that political parties that are party to those agreements are able to be held accountable against them. We've seen the rise of checkbook politics, particularly in the metros, and so what we want to be able to do is voters need to know what political parties have agreed to instead of backroom deals. And so there's a raft of other proposals that we have which have been gazetted in the last 2 weeks, and we're really hoping that the public can engage, because it is them who stand to gain from stabilized coalition governments, especially if we have a coalition government at a national level.
Well, your leverage in National Assembly also depends on your performance at the elections. Let's get straight into it. John Steenhuisen projecting the DA support at 26% there, and the ANC support at 46%. That comes to the next issue. Last night, a message going out to delegates at the conference telling them that John Steenhuisen doesn't know what he's talking about when he mentions the projections for the DA support, that the DA is likely to remain at around 20%, that its support in the black community will hover at around 5%, and that he essentially doesn't have the numbers. In fact, comparing him and his interpretation of the numbers to Jacob Zuma, the presiding officers of this Congress have flagged that message. What have they said about it?
Look, I think, Govan, we've got. I mean, I'm happy to go into the polling and what informs some of our polling and our projections, which I think is one of the best in the country, really. Our polling team, which is internal. But more than that, I think on the issue around the message that has been flagged, we obviously have rules and regulations on how internal campaigns should be run, and one of the key things is around. Essentially, while candidates are running against one another, they are part of an organization. And after 1 o'clock or 1:30 this afternoon, we still have to go out there, convince voters to get behind the DA. And so, of course, what's really important, I think, is to make sure that people are campaigning responsibly, and so that we can still have a united party even after an internal election. And I think on the polling, I mean, one of the key things that we've seen over the years, really, of having our own polling operation within the organization is that every single election we've been able to predict and project what we are likely to get. And one of the things that has informed the 26% or an increase really in our polling is the fact that we have seen, firstly, in by-election performance, but also number two, how we are polling and have been polling for a while. Of course, polling are trends and they can dip and the like, but we've consistently been polling around those figures. We also know that there's been independent polls that have been done by the ANC themselves, by other independent organizations, which predicts that the ANC is unlikely to put together a 50% majority. And that's something we're looking at very carefully, because obviously it presents an opportunity for the DA.
Well, that's one thing, the ANC coming below 50%. The other is whether the DA will grow in this election. And between 2019 and 2021, you did lose 1 million votes, and you also lost about 200 councillors. And of course, during that time, John Steenhuisen saying that the DA was broken and it was being fixed. That's the one end of the message. Let's go to what we were discussing, and that's that negative campaigning that was flagged by the presiding officers. Did the presiding officers determine who sent that message?
I'm not aware of what their ruling was and what they have decided to do with the message. As far as I'm aware, some of these things are flagged so that they can discontinue. I don't think that there are punitive measures that presiding officers take, because of course this is an internal campaign. Ultimately, their role as presiding officers is to make sure of the integrity of the campaign, and to also make sure that where candidates are stepping outside of the bounds of the rules and regulations of how to campaign, then they're able to flag to say, look, it's important that we don't trample on those rules. Because of course, as a candidate, you sign on to the code of conduct when you're launching your campaign. You sign on onto a code of conduct of how you intend of conducting yourself. So I'm not entirely sure what then the ruling was, but as far as I know, there aren't punitive measures except to flag that that kind of behavior should discontinue.
Siviwe, there were quite a number of similarities between that message, which is anonymous, and some of the messaging that came out in the speech by Dr. Palatse. Even the comparison between Jacob Zuma and Barack Obama's leadership of a country and Dr. Palatse's view that qualifications matter more than experience within the party. What's your view on the importance of qualifications in a leader?
Look, Govan, you would have to ask Dr. Palatse, of course, about her comparison and the use of that. But I think political leadership is a mixture of a number of things. I think it's incredibly important to have people in political leadership who are subject experts on certain things, who are well educated in certain things, because of course there's high level work that often has to be done, particularly at the legislation making process. But also, a political party is not just made out of people who will be legislators. There are people in a political party who are activists, who are ward councillors, the people who are focused on more on service delivery matters. And so really, I think this notion that there isn't a job description for what a politician ought to be. And I think there's a mixture, if we look behind us all, is a mixture of people who bring various strengths and various capabilities on the table. And so we must never discount, firstly, the importance of having expert knowledge on certain things, but nor must we ever discount experience, nor must we ever discount commitment to liberal values. And I think a politician is a mixture of all of those things. And ultimately, it's going to come down to the delegates, right, of what they value most. What I value most, well, as an ordinary delegate of this Congress, I'll be putting my vote behind the person who has made a compelling offer, who has the qualities that I value most as a delegate, and the delegates will make their choice.
Lastly, Siviwe, this has been an election for the federal leader which has seen a lot of passionate pleas for support to the delegates here. Yesterday, Dr. Palatse's speech certainly was fiery. It was one of the most detailed criticisms that she's delivered of the Democratic Alliance to the delegates here at the conference. Do you think that this race for the federal leader, this election contest, has been divisive?
Not at all, actually. I think internal democracy is good, and robustness is good, Govan. I think that, and for me, I mean, I haven't seen other political parties do this, where they are debating openly in front of delegates, and they've had a debate before this. They had their final address to the delegates. This is important. Delegates must be able to see that, firstly, we value internal democracy, we value robustness, obviously within the bounds of what is agreed to as the code of conduct, but we must never shy away from having difficult conversations. We must also never shy away from being able to criticize ourselves and introspect as a political party. And so not at all. I think we're stronger for it.
Thank you so much, Siviwe Gwarube. She is the national spokesperson for this Congress. She's been providing clarity on some of the developments that are happening on the floor. Also behind the scenes, the presiding officers certainly have been busy, from reassuring the delegates about the integrity of the voting system to dealing with what they call negative campaigning. Important to say that that message circulated to delegates last night on WhatsApp remains anonymous at this stage. No one has been identified as the author, and according to Siviwe Gwarube, no one will be held accountable for it or face any punitive measures. For now, Stephen, it's back to you.